Many words have been thrown around when it comes to Jalen Green, and not all of them have been kind. Shot checker, inefficient, non-winning player are all the phrases that have been thrown around towards a 21-year-old developing scoring maestro in Jalen Green. To say that the criticisms are harsh would be an understatement, but it also would be relatively irresponsible to claim that some of these critiques are not at least somewhat applicable to Green. Green, to start his NBA career, has been inefficient, and he has at times chucked shots, and it does not seem like his current style of play is usable and portable to winning basketball. But that does not mean that this will be who Jalen Green is forever. That also does not mean that the signs of a budding NBA star are not there, because they certainly are with Green. When I first think of Jalen Green, I envision the monster athlete that he is, and I also envision how said athleticism vertically and horizontally intersects with a skill level from a handling and shooting perspective that creates avenues for incredible scoring explosions. Green has more 40-point games in his career than everyone else in his draft class combined, and he also has the 9th most 40-point games for anybody 22 years old or younger in a career, right behind Michael Jeffrey Jordan. And similarly to MJ, that sounds really weird. Green's style of scoring and his handling process all works best downhill, north to south, being able to create big chunks of space to work with his acceleration. Green loves to use big spaces so that he can get to top speed, big hang dribbles, wide crossovers, and small combos to get a defender leaning, then smash the accelerator to the floor. If a defender is overly aggressive in Green's slider frame and tries to attack his weaker handle relative to some other primaries, Green likes to retreat back into space backwards, and from there, where he works best, uses acceleration to attack downhill in a similar way that Giannis Antetokounmpo, despite the aesthetic differences, does. Green's frame may be limiting, but it also does him a singular favor, and that's make him bendy like a straw. Off of handoffs, pick and roll, baseline drives, it doesn't matter. When Green looks to get downhill with the intent to cause help or to finish at the rim, you often see Green's flexibility showcase. Green gets parallel to the ground and is able to bend in spaces like Elastic Man all over the court. And from out of these downhill setups are where Green's best jump shot attempts work. His snatchback threes or his step backs usually are more effective when Green is able to create space from these out of his threat to drive. Among his class, Green ranked second in drives per game, snuggled in between Cade Cunningham and Josh Giddey. And on the Rockets, he ranked second, but this is largely due to the fact that KPJ was given a much larger pick and roll load than Green, and most drives come out of that setup. Green drove more in a system did not give him much space to operate or tactical advantages in getting him in space than the likes of Anthony Edwards, Donovan Mitchell, DeJounte Murray, Franz Wagner. Plenty guys that are known more for their downhill aptitude than Jalen Green. It's clear that Jalen Green has the ability to get in front of the rim without a screen, with the screen, and off of closeouts. But what's more needed to unlock his full potential as a scorer is Jalen Green's finishing there. Among players to drive at least 10 times, Jalen Green ranked 4th worst in the entire league at finishing off of these drives, right below the likes of Fred VanVleet and right above the likes of Kevin Porter Jr. and LaMelo Ball. Green has showed touch as a finisher since his youth days and clearly has the vertical athleticism and flexibility to be an efficient finisher, but the lack of strength will just always hurt him there. Green in the NBA has struggled to deal with contact at the rim, and this is made even more apparent when you contextualize for the fact that Green does not make these attempts any easier on himself. Also, as we talked about before, Green's handle is relatively limiting, and this caused for early pickups at times on his drives. Green also wasn't looking to pass out of a lot of these rim attempts. Once he got to the rim, his mind was set on finishing through the contact or finishing through the help. And because of that, he got himself into attempts that were often a lot worse than they had to be. The external forces like the team construction and the play type usage that Green was given are obviously limiting, but Green himself also hurt his chances of finishing at the rim on a possession by possession basis due to some of the things we discussed. But there's still hope there. Green drew fouls at the rim at a rate that very few players in the entire association can. Green drew fouls on 13% of his drives, which ranked in the 87th percentile in the entire league. And his attributed foul craft at the rim will aid his efficiency as his career goes on. I'm comfortable saying that from a long-term perspective, Green's downhill ability is a positive. Right now, we have a player whose lack of strength and his handle and his team context are limiting his ability to finish at the rim, but whose athleticism and flexibility and general proprioception are aiding to his ability to get there with a screen or without a screen. And in my opinion, the first step to primary usage is not the ability to finish once you're at the rim, but instead the ability to put the defense in rotation and gain help as a driver once you get there. Now, obviously, to gain said help in a more dramatic fashion, the finishing will have to be more polished. But that's not impossible, right? Handles tend to tighten as you age, and obviously Green will get stronger as he continues to stay in a NBA level weight development system. Now, there's no telling if he'll ever be able to handle the ball like Kyrie Irving or discard of defenders with his shoulder in the way that Jimmy Butler does, but he doesn't have to. He just needs minimum improvements in these areas and natural improvements in the way that most players do as they age in these areas to aid towards his finishing ability, and the athleticism and flexibility will do the rest of the work. Now, we've talked about the downhill ability, but now we have to talk about the shooting and how it will aid it in the future. For his career, Green is a 34% shooter on 7 attempts with pretty insane shot difficulty. So I think it's fair to say that shooting right now is not a negative on Green's part, but it is something that could drastically improve with minimum changes. Green is a 1.5 to 2 motion shooter and organizes his pre-shot footwork from left to right. On a positive note, Green has the touch and the rhythm and the flow as a shooter to match his movement styles as a shooter. So much of who Green is as an offensive player is based on his movements from north to south, and this becomes even more apparent as a shooter, i.e. the overcrosses and the T-Max or hang dribble pull-ups. And on a negative note, Green generates a lot of his power from his wrist and gathers from a midpoint and also has a slight hitch that shows especially on a lot of his fadeaways. And the most egregious part of Green's shot that should have improved greatly throughout his NBA career is just how often he's landing off balance. His twist in the air as he shoots and his affinity with landing sideways are all hindrance to what would be an elite shooter in the future. We know that Green has separation footwork and athleticism to make said separation even more dramatic. And we know that he has confidence and touch and versatility in his shot. But these small little issues will limit his shot from being ultra efficient if he doesn't fix them. I also think that his set point makes it a little harder to generate high volume in the mid-range. This has improved throughout his NBA career, but it is still right now an issue. And I also think that he struggles to generate power in these general areas out of tight spaces like pick and roll because of the freedom he has in his footwork in this area being a lot less than in an open space. He shoots 79% on free throws, which is good, and he has shown the ability to get up these three-pointers throughout a varying degree of play types. So I do think that there is confidence in the future that he will be a good shooter, a positive shooter, a shooter whose volume as a shooter is a contributing factor to a efficient NBA offense. But there are things that hurt him from being an elite shooter, which is a possible outcome. It is a very possible outcome if these things are fixed. I believe that Jalen Green can legitimately lead the league in scoring. And maybe that's a hot take. Maybe that's not something that people will agree with in the comments. But I think that it's right. I think that with average improvements in some of the factors that we've talked about that are contributing to some of his inefficiencies, Green will have the volume and efficiency and skill level, along with his athleticism, to average 28 or 29 or 30 or 31 points per game in this association. I legitimately believe that. But that in itself is not good enough to be a all-NBA level player. Scoring a bunch of points on even good efficiency is valuable, yes, and in a isolated possession has woefully amounts of value. But in a global sense, the ability to capitalize on the gravity that you garner from said scoring is more impactful. And Jalen, as far as where he started, and where he is right now is ahead of schedule as a playmaker. Jalen in the high school was a very limited passer, and in the G League, his ability to read the floor and his ability to make reads out of the pick and roll expanded, but was still relatively limited. Nowadays, Jalen is only limited as a passer in the sense of willingness to pass in certain spots. Specifically in the interior, Jalen is an advanced passer relative to his contemporaries in age and archetype. In the pick and roll with the aid of a roll man, he's shown the ability to attack a compromised defense with a bunch of different angles and deliveries, whether it's lay down passes or wonky delivered bounce passes to the roll man. Green is relatively advanced in comparison to those who have played in a similar role on similar types of teams at similar ages. Whether it's Devin Booker or it's Anthony Edwards or it's Zach LaVine, none of them at this age were this advanced as a passer. As an exterior passer, Jalen is still relatively limited, whether it's him not seeing these passes or him just not being willing to take the chance. Jalen is often not firing skip passes one-handed or even two-handed. He hasn't mastered the Tyrese Halliburton art of jump passing. Even so, the potential to get better in this aspect is clearly there just because of how much vertical pressure during his peak he'll likely be putting on the defense and how much horizontal help defenses tend to bring in response to that vertical pressure. I know that it's easy to look at Green's current ability to pass and put a limit on his future as a meaningful primary because of it, but I think that's relatively irresponsible when you contextualize for the fact that there are so many score first, quote unquote, guys that have come in the league and have a into passing ability, whether it's in their career as a international player or as a college player. And because of the coverages that they face early on in their career, they are able to develop as passers. Brandon Ingram was a solid passer at Duke. He showed passing flashes, but he's developed into maybe the second best passing small forward, power forward in general in the entire association. And the same is applicable to Jason Tatum, who walked in as, I won't say a non-passer, but somebody who was relatively unwilling to make high-level reads at Duke, and somebody who is a legit advantage creator in his current mode of creation. And Green is ahead of that curve of passers. He upped his assist percentage this year by over 30%, going from 13% to 17%. And he is in a context where he will have the majority or the second majority of offense flow through him. Defenses will continually try to pressure Jalen Green as a scorer, and his response for that will mark the horizon for who he can be as a legit engine. Jalen will never be Luka. He won't ever be Magic Johnson or LeBron James or Jason Kidd or some of the best passers of all time. And in the short term, he probably won't ever be Cade Cunningham or Sengun or Josh Giddey or any of the other high-level passing contemporaries in the 2021 class. But the idea that he's a non-passer, that he is a ball hog who only is looking to benefit himself in the flow of offense is a narrative that is wrong and should end, and very unfair to put on somebody who is 21 years old. I believe that as Jalen gains more counters as a scorer and as a playmaker, and strength becomes more of a physical asset in comparison to a physical hindrance, Jalen will provide value in his peak that is around top 25 to top 30 and a all-star level player. He'll average 26 to 29 points per game in his peak on relatively good efficiency, and the playmaking will be up to adequate levels for a offensive engine or secondary piece on a title level team. And even then, I wouldn't bog down that as Jalen's ceiling. I think that there is a bigger horizon that Green can meet. I'm unsure if he will because of the developmental context that he is in, but the pieces and the tools and the physical attributes are there for him. And I don't understand how a player that has all of that can be as hated as he is. Anyways, thanks for watching, and consider joining the Patreon where I go a little bit more in depth. It's only $1 a month at the lowest tier, and a lot of the content is just available for free if you're willing to go see it. Thank you.